Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're unlocking the secrets of our body's hidden language, that intricate symphony of chemical messages that keeps us functioning flawlessly. Imagine an entire control room operating silently, making sure every single process from growth to stress response happens precisely when and how it should. It's truly a marvel of biological engineering. Hello, tutor. What fascinating aspect of this internal communication system are we exploring today, and why is this particular topic so vital for our competitive exam aspirants?
Hello. Yes, today we embark on a crucial deep dive into chemical coordination and integration. This is a really fundamental chapter in biology. And like you said, this isn't just for your Class 11 board exams. It's absolutely foundational for top-tier competitive tests, NEET, AIMS, UPSC General Science, State PSC, and, other medical or civil services examinations too. We'll basically unravel how our body maintains its incredible harmony through this intricate network of chemical messengers we call hormones. Understanding the system is, it's key to mastering human physiology.
That sounds absolutely essential, tutor. So let's begin with the basics then. Our bodies have this incredible coordination. How does this chemical coordination stack up against the neural coordination we often hear about? And why do we even need both?
That's an excellent place to start.
Okay.
You see, our bodies ingeniously employ two primary systems for coordination, and they really work in tandem together. There's the neural system, and then there's the endocrine system, which is responsible for this chemical coordination. Think of them as two distinct but really complementary communication networks. The neural system, as you might recall from previous studies, provides very rapid point-to-point communication. It's almost like sending an urgent, direct text message to a specific person, for immediate action. For instance, when you reflexively pull your hand away from something hot, that's your neural system in action.
Right, instantaneous.
Exactly, incredibly fast, almost instantaneous. But its effects are typically very short-lived and quite localized. It's designed for those swift, precise responses to immediate stimuli.
Okay, so if the neural system is so incredibly fast and efficient, why isn't it enough on its own? Why did nature sort of insist on this whole other system, the endocrine system, especially in complex organisms like us humans?
That's a really perceptive question, and it highlights exactly why chemical coordination is utterly indispensable. The neural system, you see, despite its speed, has limitations. Firstly, nerve fibers simply do not reach every single cell in the body. That's just not feasible.
Okay.
There are countless cells and tissues that aren't directly wired into this neural network, yet they still require regulation, they still need instructions. And secondly, many vital cellular functions, think about processes like long-term growth or overall metabolism, or the gradual changes during development and reproduction, these demand continuous, widespread, and sustained regulation.
Right, not just quick bursts.
Precisely. Not just rapid transient electrical signals. Imagine trying to manage your blood sugar levels precisely throughout an entire day just with nerve signals. Or coordinating growth from childhood to adulthood. These are complex, ongoing processes that need a more diffuse and enduring form of communication. And this is exactly where chemical coordination, primarily through the endocrine system, steps in, using hormones as its messengers.
So it's not really a competition between the two systems. It sounds more like a partnership.
Exactly. It's crucial to understand that the neural and endocrine systems do not work in isolation. Not at all. Instead, they form a highly integrated partnership. They jointly coordinate and regulate almost all physiological functions in the body. The neural system handles the quick, specific tasks, the immediate reactions, while the endocrine system manages the broader, more sustained regulatory roles. This ensures comprehensive and continuous control over everything. Together, they create this beautifully integrated control network, maintaining our internal balance, our homeostasis.
Fascinating. So let's zoom in on this chemical coordination then.
Yeah.
What exactly are endocrine glands, and how do we define hormones, both in the sort of traditional sense and in our modern scientific understanding?
Okay, let's break that down. First, endocrine glands. These are distinct because they are ductless glands.
Ductless.
Yes. Unlike exocrine glands, think sweat glands or salivary glands, which release secretions like digestive enzymes through ducts or tubes, endocrine glands release their secretions, which are the hormones, directly into the bloodstream. The blood then acts as this widespread transport system, carrying these hormones all over the body to their specific target cells. Now, historically, the classical definition of a hormone was quite specific. It was understood simply as a chemical substance produced by a well-defined endocrine gland, released into the blood, and then transported to a distantly located target organ where it had its effect. A pretty straightforward view based on the major glands we could see. However, our scientific understanding has evolved quite a bit since then. The current scientific definition is much broader, much more encompassing. Today, hormones are defined as non-nutrient chemicals which act as intercellular messengers and are produced in trace amounts.
Non-nutrient chemicals and intercellular messengers. Those sound like very specific terms. Could you maybe break down what each of those truly means for our body's communication? Almost like an explain like I'm five explanation. And why is this broader definition so important?
Okay, let's try that. Imagine your body's cells are all neighbors living on a street. Non-nutrient chemicals basically means these hormones aren't like food, they don't provide energy like sugars or fats, and they aren't building blocks like proteins.
Yeah, so they're not fuel or materials.
Exactly. They are pure information, just signals, little messages. And intercellular messengers means they're designed specifically to carry messages between these neighbor cells. They're like little notes or signals passed from one cell to another, telling those cells what to do or how to behave. Start doing this, stop doing that,
I see, like tiny biological Post-it notes.
Something like that. And the significance of this broader definition is huge. It acknowledges that many cells, not just the ones in those traditional big glands, can produce these powerful chemical signals. This means hormone-like activity isn't confined to just a few organs. It's actually a pervasive system of cellular chatter happening throughout your entire body.
Wow.
Even in tissues you wouldn't normally think of as endocrine glands. This allows for a far more nuanced and integrated control system than we first realized. And just briefly, from an evolutionary perspective, invertebrates generally have simpler endocrine systems, fewer hormones. In contrast, vertebrates, especially humans like us, possess this vast array of chemicals acting as hormones. This provides incredibly complex and sophisticated coordination. For our deep dive today, though, our primary focus will be, of course, on the intricate human endocrine system, which is most relevant for your exams.
Tutor, that analogy of cells as neighbors passing notes really clicks. It makes it much clearer. Now that we understand the why and the definitions, let's explore what's the specific components of the human endocrine system. Who are the key players here?
Absolutely. The human endocrine system is, well, it's a fascinating network. It comprises both organized endocrine glands, those are the major players, and also hormone-producing diffused tissues or cells located in various other parts of our body. Let's first introduce the core, the organized endocrine glands. These include the pituitary, pineal, thyroid, adrenal, pancreas, parathyroid, thymus, and gonads.
The gonads being?
Right. Specifically the testis in males and the ovary in females. As you maybe visualize figure 19.1 from your NCERT textbook, or just picture a diagram of the human body, imagine these crucial glands strategically positioned from the brain all the way down to the pelvic region. But it's really important to remember hormone production isn't exclusive to these big organized glands.
Ah, right. You mentioned that broader definition.
Exactly. Some other organs, often not primarily classified as endocrine glands, also produce hormones. We'll touch on these later, but just to give you a hint. Places like the gastrointestinal tract, the liver, kidney, even the heart, they all contribute to our body's hormonal landscape.
Interesting.
But for now, our focus will be on the major organized glands, and let's start with a true orchestrator, a real command center, the hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus. I've often heard it called the master controller of the endocrine system, or maybe the master of the master gland. Where exactly is it located, and what's its primary job?
Yes, master controller is a good description. The hypothalamus is a vital, though quite small, pea-sized part of our brain. Specifically, it's located as the basal part of the diencephalon, deep within the forebrain. Its position right at the brain's base makes it a central command post. Its primary function is incredibly broad. It regulates a huge spectrum of body functions. Essentially, it serves as the crucial neuroendocrine link. It connects the nervous system to the endocrine system. Structurally, the hypothalamus contains several groups of specialized nerve cells. We call these neurosecretory cells, or sometimes nuclei. These unique neurons are the ones responsible for actually producing the hypothalamic hormones. And these hormones, in turn, control the synthesis and secretion of hormones from the pituitary gland, which will be our next major topic. Now, the hormones produced by the hypothalamus fall into two main types. First, we have releasing hormones. As their name suggests, these stimulate the synthesis and secretion of hormones from the pituitary. A classic example you need to know is gonadotrophin-releasing hormone, or GnRH. GnRH acts on the pituitary, telling it to synthesize and release gonadotrophins.
Which are three.
Yes, which are luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH. The second type are inhibiting hormones. These obviously do the opposite. They inhibit the secretions of pituitary hormones. A good example from the hypothalamus is somatostatin. Somatostatin specifically inhibits a release of growth hormone from the pituitary gland, so it acts like a brake.
So the hypothalamus doesn't just hit the gas. It also applies the brakes. That makes sense for control. How do these powerful hypothalamic hormones actually get to the pituitary and influence it? Is it a direct nerve connection or something more intricate?
That's a crucial distinction, and the mechanism is quite sophisticated. Actually, it involves different pathways for the anterior and posterior parts of the pituitary. Let's take this step by step to visualize it. Maybe think about figure 19.2 in the insert text. Okay, first, the hypothalamic hormones, both the releasing and inhibiting types, are produced by those specialized neurosecretory neurons within the hypothalamus itself. Second, these hormones travel down the axons, the long projections of these neurons. Third, they are released from the nerve endings not directly onto pituitary cells, but into a unique vascular pathway, the portal circulatory system.
A portal system, like in the liver.
Similar concept, yes. It's a network of tiny blood vessels that directly connects the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary gland. Fourth, these hormones then swiftly travel through the special portal system to reach the anterior pituitary. There, they bind to specific receptors on the pituitary cells, either stimulating or inhibiting the pituitary's own hormone production. So, for the anterior pituitary, the link is through this special blood-borne messenger system. Now, here's a crucial difference for the posterior pituitary gland. It is under direct neural regulation from the hypothalamus.
Direct neural, so actual nerves.
Yes, exactly. This means that instead of releasing hormones into a portal system, the hypothalamic neurons actually extend their axons directly down the pituitary stalk and into the posterior pituitary itself. These hypothalamic neurons synthesize hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin up in the hypothalamus. They then transport them down their axons to the posterior pituitary.
And the posterior pituitary just stores them.
Precisely. They are stored there and later released into the bloodstream upon a direct neural signal, an electrical impulse, coming down from the hypothalamus. So for the posterior pituitary, the control is essentially a direct nerve connection, not blood-borne messengers.
Wow, okay. Two very different ways the hypothalamus controls the two parts of the pituitary. That brings us perfectly to the pituitary gland itself. It's often called the master gland, as we mentioned. Can you tell us about its location, its anatomical divisions, and the huge array of hormones it produces?
Indeed, the pituitary is often dubbed the master gland, and for very good reason, as we'll see. This small pea-sized gland is nestled very securely within a bony cavity at the base of the skull. This cavity is called the sella turstica, and it's intimately attached to the hypothalamus by a stalk, maintaining that critical connection we just discussed. Anatomically, the pituitary is divided into two main parts: the adenohypophysis, which is essentially the anterior pituitary, and the neurohypophysis, which is the posterior pituitary. Let's break down each of these because they have quite distinct roles and produce or release different sets of hormones. First, the adenohypophysis, or anterior pituitary. This part is a real powerhouse of hormone production. It's further divided anatomically into the pars distalis and the pars intermedia. The pars distalis, which is what people commonly refer to as the anterior pituitary, produces 6 really crucial hormones. There's growth hormone, GH, essential for overall body growth; prolactin, PRL, mainly involved in milk production; thyroid-stimulating hormone, TSH, which, as the name suggests, stimulates the thyroid gland; adrenocorticotrophic hormone, ACTH, this one acts on the adrenal cortex; luteinizing hormone, LH, one of the gonadotrophins vital for reproduction; and follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, the other gonadotrophin, also key for reproduction.
That's quite a list. Let's maybe talk about the specific functions of these anterior pituitary hormones and what happens when their levels go wrong. These imbalances are often key for exam questions, aren't they, tutor?
Absolutely. Understanding these functions and their associated disorders is critical for exams. Let's elaborate on each one, starting with growth hormone, GH. Its function, GH is critical for overall body growth, especially promoting bone and muscle development. It's like the body's primary construction manager.
Right. And disorders.
Right. Disorders. If there's oversecretion of GH, what happens depends on age. In childhood, it leads to gigantism, where individuals grow to an exceptionally large stature. You get abnormally tall. But in adults, typically middle age, excess GH causes something called acromegaly.
Acromegaly.
Yes, this is quite different. It's a severe disfigurement, particularly noticeable in the face, hands, and feet. Bones and soft tissue start growing again, disproportionately. Acromegaly can lead to serious complications, even premature death if it goes undetected. And it's often hard to diagnose early because the changes are quite gradual.
Wow, and too little GH.
Yes, low secretion of GH in childhood leads to pituitary dwarfism, resulting in significantly stunted growth. Next up, prolactin, PRL. Its main function is regulating the growth of the mammary glands in females, and critically, it stimulates the formation and secretion of milk after childbirth. Then, thyroid-stimulating hormone, TSH. TSH's job is pretty straightforward from its name. It acts directly on the thyroid gland, stimulating it to synthesize and secrete its own vital hormones, T4 and T3, which we'll discuss later. Following that is adrenocorticotrophic hormone, ACTH. ACTH's target is the adrenal cortex, the outer part of the adrenal gland. It stimulates the synthesis and secretion of steroid hormones, specifically the glucocorticoids like cortisol from this adrenal cortex. And finally, the gonadotrophins, luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH. They're called gonadotrophins because they stimulate gonadal activity, the activity of the testes and ovaries.
Right, so how do they differ in males and females?
Good question. In males, LH stimulates specific cells in the testes, the Leydig cells, to synthesize androgens, the main one being testosterone. FSH, working together with these androgens, is crucial for regulating spermatogenesis, the process of sperm formation. In females, LH has a couple of key roles. It induces ovulation, the release of the mature egg from the follicle, and it maintains the structure formed after ovulation, the corpus luteum, which then secretes progesterone. FSH, on the other hand, stimulates the growth and development of the ovarian follicles themselves, where the eggs mature.
That's a very thorough list for the pars distalis, the main part of the anterior pituitary. What about that other part you mentioned, the pars intermedia? Does it do much in humans?
The pars intermedia is much simpler, especially in us humans. It secretes only one known hormone, melanocyte-stimulating hormone, MSH. And interestingly, in humans, the pars intermedia is almost merged with the pars distalis. It's not very distinct.
Okay, and MSH, what does it do?
MSH acts on specific cells called melanocytes. These are the cells containing the melanin pigment. And so MSH regulates skin pigmentation, influencing our skin color. Right, now let's turn to the second main division of the pituitary, the neurohypophysis. This is also known as the pars nervosa, or more commonly, the posterior pituitary.
And this is the one that doesn't make its own hormones, right? It just stores them.
Exactly. Unlike the anterior pituitary, the posterior pituitary doesn't synthesize its own hormones. Instead, it serves as a carefully managed storage and release site for two hormones, oxytocin and vasopressin.
And where do they come from again?
This is a crucial point, often tested. These hormones are actually synthesized by those neurosecretory nuclei up in the hypothalamus. They are then transported down the nerve fibers, the axons, to the neurohypophysis, where they are stored in the nerve endings and released into the blood when needed.
So the posterior pituitary is like a sophisticated storage facility, a warehouse for these specific hypothalamic hormones. What are the functions of oxytocin and vasopressin, and are there any disorders linked to them?
Precisely. Let's look at their functions and a key disorder associated with vasopressin. First, oxytocin. Its primary function is acting on smooth muscles, stimulating them to contract.
Smooth muscles? Like where?
In females, its most well-known actions are stimulating those vigorous uterine contractions during childbirth, absolutely essential for labor, and also milk ejection or letdown from the mammary gland when a baby suckles. Now, vasopressin. This one also had another very important name, antidiuretic hormone, or ADH.
Antidiuretic. So it stops urination.
In a way, yes. It reduces urine output. Its main function is acting on the kidney, specifically stimulating the reabsorption of water and also electrolytes by the distal tubules. This action significantly reduces water loss through urine, hence the name antidiuretic hormone, ADH. It's a critical water conserver for the body.
Okay, makes sense. And a disorder.
Yes, if there's an impairment affecting the synthesis or release of ADH, the kidney loses its ability to conserve water efficiently. This results in excessive water loss through large volumes of dilute urine, leading to severe dehydration and intense thirst. This condition is known as diabetes insipidus.
Diabetes insipidus.
Yeah.
Important to distinguish that from diabetes mellitus, right?
Absolutely, critical distinction. Diabetes mellitus is related to blood sugar and insulin, which we'll get to later. Diabetes insipidus is purely about water balance and ADH dysfunction.
Tutor, the pituitary is indeed widely called the master gland. That seems fair given everything, guys. But you also call the hypothalamus the master of the master. Can you elaborate on why the pituitary gets this title? And then, more specifically, recap how the hypothalamus exerts its ultimate control, keeping in mind those different mechanisms for the anterior and posterior parts. That distinction feels really important to nail down.
That's a very insightful question. And yes, understanding this hierarchy and the distinct control mechanisms is absolutely fundamental. It's a concept that often features prominently in competitive exams. The pituitary is certainly the master gland because many of its hormones are what we call trophic hormones.
Trophic.
Meaning they feed or regulate the functions of other major endocrine glands. Think about TSH controlling the thyroid, ACTH controlling the adrenal cortex, and LH, FSH controlling the gonads. So the pituitary is like a central manager issuing commands to various department heads throughout the body. However, to extend that analogy, if the pituitary is the manager, then the hypothalamus is the CEO, the true master of the master, the ultimate orchestrator pulling the strings. It dictates what the pituitary does. So let's revisit, step by step, its intricate control mechanism, which, as you correctly noted, differs significantly for the anterior and posterior parts. Okay, first for the anterior pituitary. The adenohypophysis. The hypothalamus controls this part using that specialized portal circulatory system. Hypothalamic neurosecretory cells synthesize and release their hormones, either the stimulating releasing hormones or the inhibiting hormones, directly into these tiny portal blood vessels. These vessels then carry the hormones swiftly and directly down the stalk to the anterior pituitary.
So the hormones travel through blood.
Exactly. Once they arrive, they bind to specific receptors on the anterior pituitary cells, triggering or halting the synthesis and release of those anterior pituitary hormones like GH, TSH, ACTH, LH, and FSH. So it's a humoral or blood-borne communication link for controlling the anterior pituitary. Second, for the posterior pituitary, the neurohypophysis, the control is fundamentally different. It's neural and direct. Here, the hypothalamic neurons don't release their hormones into a portal system at all. Instead, the cell bodies of these specialized neurons are up in the hypothalamus, but their axons extend directly down the pituitary stalk and terminate right within the posterior pituitary itself.
Like long wires.
Precisely. These hypothalamic neurons actually synthesize the hormones oxytocin and vasopressin up in the hypothalamus. These hormones are then transported down these wires, the axons, to the posterior pituitary. There, they are stored and released into the general circulation only when a direct neural signal, an electrical impulse, comes down that axon from the hypothalamus. So while the pituitary issues many commands, the hypothalamus is the ultimate orchestrator, meticulously controlling it through these two distinct, really quite elegant mechanisms.
Thank you, Tutor, for clarifying that crucial hierarchy and those specific control mechanisms. It really emphasizes how interconnected everything is. Let's move on to the next gland on our list, the pineal gland. It's quite small, isn't it?
Certainly. Yes, the pineal gland is another small but surprisingly significant endocrine gland. Its location. It is situated on the dorsal or backside of the forebrain, nestled deep within the brain structure, and the hormone it secretes. The pineal gland secretes one crucial hormone called melatonin. Now, for its functions. Melatonin plays a very important role in regulating the body's 24-hour rhythm, what we call the diurnal rhythm.
Internal body clock.
Exactly, our internal clock, often referred to as the circadian rhythm. Some key examples of what melatonin regulates. It helps maintain the normal rhythms of our sleep-wake cycle, influencing when we naturally feel tired and when we feel alert. It also plays a role in regulating our body temperature, ensuring it follows a consistent daily pattern, usually dropping slightly at night. But its influences go beyond just sleep. Melatonin also impacts several other physiological processes, including metabolism, skin pigmentation, the menstrual cycle in females, and even our defense capability, contributing to the proper functioning of our immune system.
Wow, quite a lot for one little gland.
It is indeed, and a relatable example might be helpful. Think about how disturbances in your sleep pattern, maybe from studying late or traveling, or the intense feeling of jet lag can completely throw your body's rhythm out of sync.
Oh yeah, jet lag is rough.
It is. Melatonin production naturally increases in darkness, which helps promote sleep. So when your light-dark cycle is disrupted, melatonin signaling gets confused. Understanding melatonin helps explain why maintaining regular sleep schedules is important and why things like jet lag happen. It's key in helping reset that internal clock.
That's a clear explanation of how melatonin keeps our body sort of synchronized. Next up, let's talk about the thyroid gland. Its structure, the vital hormones it produces. This gland seems to come up a lot in health discussions.
The thyroid gland is indeed a critical player. It's responsible for regulating many vital metabolic processes across the entire body, a very important gland. Its location. It's composed of two distinct lobes located on either side of the trachea, your windpipe, in your neck. These lobes give it a kind of butterfly shape. These two lobes are interconnected by a thin flap of connective tissue called the isthmus, which crosses in front of the trachea. If you refer to figure 19.3a in your NCERT book, you can see its position clearly on the ventral side of the trachea.
Okay, like a butterfly wrapping around the windpipe.
A good way to picture it. And its structure. Inside, the thyroid gland is made up of numerous small functional units called follicles, surrounded by supportive stromal tissues. Each thyroid follicle consists of follicular cells enclosing a central cavity, which stores hormone precursors. Now, the hormones from these follicular cells, these cells are responsible for synthesizing two primary hormones, tetrodothioneine, which is more commonly known as thyroxine or T4, and triiodothyronine or T3. And here's a critical point, especially for exams in India and many parts of the world. Iodine is absolutely essential for the normal rate of synthesis of these thyroid hormones. Without sufficient dietary iodine, the thyroid simply cannot produce enough T3 and T4.
So iodine deficiency can have really serious consequences then. What are some of the disorders related to imbalances in thyroid hormone production? Hypo and hyperthyroidism. What are the key differences a student should know?
Indeed, iodine deficiency and other causes of thyroid hormone imbalances can lead to a range of significant disorders. These are very commonly tested. Let's break them down into the two main categories. First, hypothyroidism, which means there's a deficiency of thyroid hormones. The cause is often, particularly historically and in certain regions, a deficiency of iodine in the diet. The most visible symptom can be the enlargement of the thyroid gland itself, a condition commonly known as goiter. The gland swells up, essentially trying harder and harder to capture the scarce iodine and produce hormones. Now, hypothyroidism during pregnancy is exceptionally serious. It causes defective development and maturation of the growing baby. This can lead to severe conditions like cretinism.
Cretinism.
Yes. Characterized by stunted growth, significant mental retardation, a low intelligence quotient IQ, abnormal skin development, and even deaf mutism. It really underscores the critical role of thyroid hormones in early neurological and physical development. In adult women, hypothyroidism can also cause the menstrual cycle to become irregular, impacting fertility and reproductive health. Other common signs overall include unexplained weight gain, feeling constantly tired or lethargic, and intolerance to cold temperatures. Second, the opposite condition, hyperthyroidism, which occurs due to an excessive production of thyroid hormones. The cause here is usually increased synthesis and secretion of thyroid hormones to abnormally high levels. This might be due to cancer of the thyroid gland or the development of thyroid nodules that become overactive and produce hormones independently. The effects of too much thyroid hormone adversely affect many aspects of body physiology. It's like the body's engine is running way too fast.
Right.
A specific and severe form of hyperthyroidism is exophthalmic goiter, also known as Graves' disease.
Graves' disease.
Yes. It's characterized by three key signs you should remember. 1, enlargement of the thyroid gland, again a goiter, but this time due to overactivity, not deficiency. 2, protrusion of the eyeballs, called exophthalmos, which gives a characteristic staring appearance. And 3, a significantly increased basal metabolic rate, BMR.
Increased BMR, so they lose weight.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
Significant weight loss despite a normal or even increased appetite is common. Other signs include a rapid heart rate, anxiety, tremors, and heat intolerance.
So these hormones clearly have a profound impact on our entire system. What are the key functions of T3 and T4 that make them so essential for just everyday living?
The functions of thyroid hormones T3 and T4 are indeed widespread and absolutely critical for maintaining overall bodily homeostasis. First, they play a critical role in regulating the basal metabolic rate, DMR. This is basically the rate at which your body uses energy when you're completely at rest. It influences how quickly you burn calories and how much body heat you generate.
Okay, metabolism.
Yes, fundamental to metabolism. Second, these hormones also support the essential process of red blood cell formation, erythropoiesis, helping ensure you have enough red blood cells to carry oxygen throughout your body. Third, they control the metabolism of all the major macronutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. They influence how your body uses and stores energy derived from the food you eat. And finally, thyroid hormones significantly influence the maintenance of water and electrolyte balance in the body, which is crucial for proper cell function and overall fluid regulation. And just one more point about the thyroid. There's another important protein hormone secreted by the thyroid gland, distinct from T3 and T4. This is thyrocalcitonin. TCT.
TCT, what does that do?
TCT has a very specific function. It regulates blood calcium levels. Specifically, it decreases blood calcium levels, working in opposition to another hormone we're about to discuss. This finely tuned balance between hormones that raise and lower calcium is essential for bone health, nerve function, muscle contraction, and more.
That's incredibly helpful for understanding both the how and the what to look for with thyroid function. Now, let's turn our attention to the parathyroid gland. You just mentioned it works in opposition to thyrocalcitonin, affecting calcium.
You're right. The parathyroid gland is indeed the other key player, the major player, in fact, in maintaining calcium balance, its location. In humans, there are typically 4 very small parathyroid glands. They are quite precisely located on the backside, the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. Usually, there's 1 pair embedded in the back of each of the 2 thyroid lobes, so they're tiny, often pea-sized structures nestled right behind the thyroid. You can see this in figure 19.3b of the NCERT text, showing the posterior view.
4 tiny glands.
Okay. And the hormones secreted, the parathyroid glands secrete a single but extremely important peptide hormone called parathyroid hormone, PTH, also sometimes called parathormone. Now, its regulation of secretion is interesting. It's not controlled by the pituitary gland. Instead, the secretion of PTH is very precisely and directly regulated by the circulating levels of calcium ions, Ca2+, in the blood.
So if calcium is low.
Exactly. When blood calcium levels drop below the normal range, PTH secretion increases directly in response almost immediately.
Okay, so how exactly does PTH work to increase blood calcium levels? What are the mechanisms it uses? It sounds like it has to pull calcium from somewhere.
PTH is classified as a hypercalcemic hormone. That means its primary function is to increase the calcium ion, Ca2+, levels in the blood. It achieves this through a clever, multi-pronged approach, acting on several target organs. First, its action on bones. Bones are our body's major calcium reservoir, right? PTH acts on bone cells to stimulate the process of bone resorption.
Resorption, like dissolving bone.
Essentially, yes. It's the dissolution or demineralization of the bone matrix. This process releases stored calcium ions and phosphate from the bones into the bloodstream, thus raising blood calcium levels. Second, its action on kidneys. PTH also acts on the kidneys. It stimulates the reabsorption of Ca2+ by the renal tubules, particularly in the distal parts. This means less calcium is lost through urine, helping to conserve it. It also promotes the excretion of phosphate ions, which helps keep calcium soluble in the blood. Third, its action on digestion. This is a bit more indirect. PTH increases a Ca2+ absorption from the digested food in the intestine. It does this mainly by stimulating the kidneys to produce the active form of vitamin D. And it's this active vitamin D that then significantly enhances calcium absorption from the gut. So it's really clear that PTH, by increasing blood Ca2+ levels, works in a directly antagonistic yet complementary manner with thyrocalcitonin, TCT, from the thyroid gland, which decreases blood calcium levels.
The push-pull system.
Exactly, a beautiful push-pull system. Together, PTH and TCT play this significant and finely tuned role in maintaining calcium homeostasis in the body. This dual control ensures that blood calcium levels remain within a very narrow, healthy range, which is absolutely critical for things like nerve impulse transmission, muscle contraction, blood clotting, and maintaining bone integrity.
That's a great example of how different hormones work antagonistically to maintain a vital balance. Next up on our tour is the thymus gland, a gland often associated with immunity, especially early in life.
That's a very accurate association. The thymus plays a truly crucial role, particularly in the development and education of our immune system, although its function does tend to diminish significantly as we age. Its location. The thymus gland is a lobular structure situated in the chest, between the lungs, positioned behind the sternum, your breastbone, and on the ventral front side of the aorta. Its major role. As you said, its most significant function is its crucial role in the development and maturation of the immune system. You can almost think of it as an immune school or training center for certain types of white blood cells.
An immune school, I like that.
And the hormones secreted. This gland secretes a group of peptide hormones collectively called thymusines.
And what do these thymusins specifically do for our immune system? How do they actually provide us with immunity?
Thymusins are absolutely vital for establishing a robust and effective immune response. Let's take this step by step. First, cell-mediated immunity. Thymosins play a major role in the differentiation and maturation of T lymphocytes, or T cells. These T lymphocytes are specialized white blood cells. They mature in the thymus, hence the T. They are directly responsible for providing cell-mediated immunity.
Cell-mediated. meaning the cells themselves fight.
Exactly. T cells directly attack infected body cells, foreign invaders like viruses or fungi, and even cancer cells. It's a direct cellular assault. Second, humoral immunity. But that's not all. In addition to this direct cellular defense, thymosins also promote the production of antibodies by other types of immune cells, like B lymphocytes. Antibodies circulate in bodily fluids, the humors, so thymosins thereby contribute indirectly to humoral immunity as well. Now, a very important point to understand its long-term impact relates to aging. The thymus gland begins to degenerate or involute in old individuals. It shrinks significantly.
That's true.
Yes, it does. This degeneration results in a decreased production of thymosins. And as a direct consequence, the immune responses of elderly persons become significantly weaker. This partly explains why older individuals are generally more susceptible to infections and diseases. A relatable example here might be to consider the typically robust immune system of children. Think about how effectively they often fight off new infections compared to older adults.
Yeah, kids seem to bounce back quicker.
Exactly. This strong childhood immunity is partly attributable to a large, active, and fully functional thymus gland. As we age, this gland gradually shrinks and becomes less active, contributing to that higher susceptibility of older individuals to common infections like the cold, flu, pneumonia, and other pathogens.
That's a really clear connection between the thymus, aging, and immune response. Okay, let's move on to the adrenal gland next. This one is famously associated with stress, the fight or flight response.
The adrenal gland is indeed famously linked to stress, but it actually has much broader functions that are crucial for both survival and daily regulation. First, the location. Our body has one pair of adrenal glands. There's one gland located directly on top of each kidney, almost like a little triangular cap sitting atop the kidney. You can see this clearly in figure 19.4 in the NCERT book. And the structure. Each adrenal gland is a fascinating organ, really like two glands fused into one. It's composed of two distinct types of tissues, each producing its own set of hormones. There's the adrenal medulla, which is the centrally located tissue forming the inner core of the gland. And then there's the adrenal cortex, which is the outer layer that completely surrounds the adrenal medulla. You can visualize it almost like a fruit with a distinct pulp, the medulla, and a thicker peel, the cortex. Figure 19.4b shows this section clearly. Let's delve into each of these distinct parts, starting with the inner part, the adrenal medulla. The hormones secreted here are primarily two. Adrenaline, which is also known as epinephrine, and noradrenaline, also known as norepinephrine. These two are chemically very similar and are grouped together as catecholamines.
Adrenaline and noradrenaline, the stress hormones.
Yes, they are famously known as the emergency hormones, or hormones of fight or flight, and for good reason. These hormones are incredibly important and are rapidly secreted within seconds in response to any kind of stress, whether it's a physical threat, emotional pressure, injury, or even just intense exercise. They instantly prepare the body for immediate, vigorous action.
Okay, so how exactly do these fight or flight hormones from the adrenal medulla prepare the body for an immediate threat? What kind of specific changes do they trigger? Sounds pretty dramatic.
Their effects are quite dramatic and very widespread, all designed to mobilize energy reserves and sharpen senses for immediate survival. Let's take this step by step. First, enhanced alertness. They significantly increase alertness, making you hyper-aware, focused, and ready to react. Second, sensory and physical adjustments. They cause pupillary dilation, allowing more light into your eyes for potentially better vision in dim conditions. They also induce piloerection, that's the raising of hairs on your skin, what we commonly call goosebumps. And you'll experience increased sweating, which helps cool the body during expected exertion. Third, cardiovascular and respiratory effects. Both adrenaline and noradrenaline dramatically increase the heartbeat rate and the strength of heart contraction. This pumps blood much more efficiently to muscles and vital organs. They also increase the rate and depth of respiration, bringing more oxygen into the body.
Get ready for action.
Exactly. Fourth, metabolic changes. Critically, they stimulate the rapid breakdown of glycogen stored in the liver and muscles, a process called glycogenesis. This releases a sudden burst of glucose into the bloodstream, providing immediate fuel for muscles. Additionally, they also stimulate the breakdown of lipids, fats, through lipolysis, and even proteins, proteolysis, to further contribute to energy availability. All these rapid actions ensure the body is instantly primed to either confront a threat, fight, or flee from it, flight, within mere seconds. Okay, now let's shift our focus to the adrenal cortex, the outer layer of the adrenal gland. This part is structurally more complex. Anatomically, it's divided into three distinct layers if you go from the innermost layer outwards. There's the zona reticularis, innermost, then the zona fasciculata, the middle layer, usually the thickest, and the zona glomerulosa, the outermost layer. Now, the adrenal cortex secretes many different hormones, but these are all steroid hormones, and they are collectively known as corticoids or corticosteroids. These corticoids are further categorized based on their primary functions.
Okay, different layers, different corticoids. What are the main types of corticoids produced by the cortex, and what are their specific roles? These sound like they might be involved in more sustained, long-term processes compared to the instant fight-or-flight response from the medulla.
Precisely. You've hit on a key difference. The adrenal cortex hormones are generally involved in longer-term adaptations and regulation, including the body's response to chronic stress. There are 3 primary types or classes of steroid hormones secreted by the adrenal cortex, each with vital, more sustained functions. First, glucocorticoids. Their primary involvement is in regulating metabolism, particularly carbohydrate metabolism, and helping the body cope with stress over longer periods. The main glucocorticoid in our body, the one you absolutely need to know, is cortisol.
Cortisol.
And the functions of cortisol are numerous and vital. It stimulates gluconeogenesis, that's the formation of glucose from non-carbohydrate sources like amino acids and fats. It also stimulates lipolysis, breakdown of fats, and proteolysis, breakdown of proteins. All of this helps make energy available, especially during stressful situations or periods of fasting. Interestingly, it also inhibits the cellular uptake and utilization of amino acids by most tissues, sort of preserving them. Cortisol is also involved in maintaining the cardiovascular system and supporting kidney functions, contributing to things like blood pressure regulation. And a very important function, clinically relevant too, is this role in producing anti-inflammatory reactions and significantly suppressing the immune response.
Suppressing immunity. Why would it do that?
Well, acutely, it prevents the immune system from overreacting during stress or injury. But chronically, this suppression can be problematic. It's why synthetic corticosteroids are powerful drugs used to treat inflammatory conditions like arthritis and autoimmune diseases, but also why they have side effects related to immunity. Cortisol also stimulates RBC production, second major class, mineralocorticoids. Their primary involvement is crucial for regulating the balance of water and electrolytes, particularly sodium Na+ and potassium K+ in our body. The main mineralocorticoid is aldosterone.
Aldosterone sounds like salt.
It's heavily involved with salt balance, yes. The functions of aldosterone. It acts mainly at the renal tubules in the kidneys. It specifically stimulates the reabsorption of Now+ sodium ions and water from the kidney tubules back into the blood. This helps conserve these vital substances and maintain blood volume and pressure. Conversely, it stimulates the excretion of K+ potassium ions and phosphate ions from the body into the urine. So through these precise actions, aldosterone plays a huge role in the maintenance of electrolytes, overall body fluid volume, osmotic pressure, and consequently blood pressure. And the third class, androgenic steroids, amount. Only small amounts of these sex steroid-like hormones are secreted by the adrenal cortex in both males and females. Their function. They seem to play a role in the growth of axial hair, like underarm hair, pubic hair, and maybe facial hair during puberty. They contribute somewhat to the development of secondary sexual characteristics, but their effects are generally much less potent compared to the androgens from the testes or estrogens from the ovaries. And before we leave the adrenal cortex, it's important to note a significant disorder associated with its underfunction: Addison's disease.
Addison's disease.
Yes. This condition results from the underproduction of hormones by the adrenal cortex, meaning both glucocorticoids, like cortisol, and mineralocorticoids, like aldosterone, are deficient. It severely alters carbohydrate metabolism, leading to symptoms like acute weakness, profound fatigue, weight loss, low blood pressure, and characteristic changes in skin pigmentation, often a bronzing of the skin. It can be life-threatening if not treated.
Tudor, you've clearly laid out the roles of the medulla for immediate stress and the cortex for longer-term regulation and stress response. So just to really crystallize this, how do those fight-or-flight hormones from the medulla specifically prepare the body for that immediate threat, and what are the dangerous long-term consequences if someone experiences chronic stress, keeping that adrenal system constantly firing? This acute versus chronic distinction seems absolutely critical for exams in health.
Absolutely. This distinction between the acute stress response, primarily mediated by the adrenal medulla, and the chronic stress response, where the adrenal cortex plays a major role, is a very common area for exam questions and, more importantly, for understanding real-world health implications. So when faced with an immediate acute danger, maybe a sudden loud noise, a near-miss accident, or even the pressure of an impending exam deadline, the adrenal medulla acts almost instantaneously. Within seconds, it floods the body with adrenaline and noradrenaline, those fight-or-flight catecholamines. Let's visualize this step by step for the acute response. First, these catecholamines trigger that rapid cascade of physiological changes we discussed. They significantly increase your heart rate and the force of heart contractions, ensuring blood is pumped more vigorously, especially diverting it towards skeletal muscles, preparing them for intense action. Second, they dilate your pupils for potentially better vision and dilate airways for increased oxygen intake. Third, respiration rate increases to maximize that oxygen supply. Fourth, they stimulate the rapid breakdown of glycogen in the liver and muscles, releasing a quick burst of glucose into the bloodstream for immediate energy. This whole coordinated system is like hitting an emergency boost button. It makes you hyper alert, stronger, faster, ready to either confront the threat or escape it. It's designed as a powerful short-term surge for immediate survival. However, the real problem arises with chronic stress. This is where the stressor isn't a brief emergency, but is ongoing, maybe work pressure, financial worries, relationship issues. Here, the fight or flight system, along with the adrenal cortex's response, gets constantly activated over extended periods, weeks, months, even years.
And that's bad.
Yes, this has potentially detrimental long-term consequences on both the adrenal hormones themselves and overall health. While the medulla provides the initial jolt, it's the adrenal cortex, particularly through the sustained high secretion of cortisol, that becomes central to the chronic stress response. Prolonged high levels of cortisol, that main glucocorticoid, can lead to several serious issues. It can contribute to persistent high blood pressure, increasing the risk of heart attack and stroke. Remember its immune-suppressing effects. Acutely, that's helpful, preventing overinflammation. But chronically, it leads to a weakened immune system, making you more vulnerable to infections and potentially even cancers. Chronic stimulation of gluconeogenesis by cortisol can lead to persistently high blood glucose levels, increasing the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. It can also cause muscle weakness and loss of bone density over time due to sustained protein breakdown. And beyond the physical, chronic high cortisol can negatively impact mood, contributing to anxiety and depression, impair memory and concentration, and disrupt sleep patterns. So while the adrenal glands are absolutely vital for short-term survival, this chronic overactivation really underscores the importance of stress management techniques and understanding the delicate balance of these powerful hormones for maintaining long-term health. It's a critical concept.
That's a very critical distinction, Tudor. Thank you. It really highlights that fine line between a helpful adaptive response and a harmful chronic state. Okay, now let's move on to the pancreas. This is a gland that plays a fascinating dual role in our body, involved in both digestion and hormones.
The pancreas is indeed a fascinating organ, often described quite accurately as a composite gland or a heterocrine gland.
Composite, meaning mixed.
Exactly. It means it performs dual functions. It acts as both an exocrine gland, secreting digestive enzymes through a duct into the small intestine to help break down food. And, crucially for our topic today, it also acts as an endocrine gland, secreting vital hormones directly into the bloodstream. If you recall figure 19.1, you can see its location, nestled sort of behind the stomach in the upper abdomen. Now, the endocrine part of the pancreas consists of specialized clusters of cells that are scattered throughout the pancreatic tissue, almost like little islands. These clusters are known as the islets of Langerhans.
Islets of Langerhans. I remember that name.
Yes, a very important name. Quantity. A normal human pancreas contains approximately 1 to 2 million of these islets of Langerhans. That might sound like a lot, but they actually represent only a tiny fraction, about 1 to 2% of the total pancreatic tissue. The vast majority is exocrine tissue for digestion. And types of cells within these islets, there are several types, but 2 main types are absolutely vital for hormone production in the context of blood sugar regulation. There are the I cells, alpha cells. These cells secrete a hormone called glucagon, and then there are the Ba cells, beta cells. These cells secrete the very famous hormone called insulin.
Insulin and glucagon. These 2 hormones are definitely well known for their role in blood sugar control. Can you elaborate on their specific functions and how they work together to maintain glucose homeostasis? You described it earlier as almost like a tightrope walk for our energy levels.
Absolutely. Insulin and glucagon are the primary indispensable regulators of blood glucose concentration. And they work in a beautifully synchronized yet antagonistic fashion. Yes, a perfect tightrope walk analogy for maintaining that balance. Let's start with glucagon, secreted by the alpha cells. Its nature. Glucagon is a peptide hormone. Its role. It plays an important role in maintaining normal blood glucose levels, specifically by preventing them from dropping too low, hypoglycemia. You can think of it as your body's emergency fuel pump activated when fuel runs low. Its action. Its primary target cells are the liver cells, the hepatocytes, its effects. Glucagon stimulates glycogenolysis in the liver. That's the breakdown of stored glycogen, which is stored glucose, back into glucose, which is then released into the blood. This process directly leads to an increased blood sugar level, a state we call hyperglycemia. In addition, glucagon also stimulates gluconeogenesis in the liver, remember that? The formation of new glucose from non-carbohydrate sources like amino acids and glycerol. This also contributes to hyperglycemia. And furthermore, glucagon reduces cellular glucose uptake and utilization by most tissues, except the brain, ensuring more glucose remains available in the blood, especially for the brain during fasting. So its classification is clear. Glucagon is a hyperglycemic hormone. It raises blood sugar. Now, for insulin, secreted by the beta cells, its nature, insulin is also a peptide hormone. Its role, it plays the major role in the opposite direction in the regulation of glucose homeostasis by lowering blood glucose levels, particularly after a meal. It's like the storage manager for your body's sugar, putting excess fuel away safely. Its action, insulin acts mainly on hepatocytes, liver cells, adipocytes, fat cells, and muscle cells. Its effects, it dramatically enhances cellular glucose uptake and utilization by these target cells. It essentially unlocks the doors of these cells, allowing glucose to move rapidly from the blood into the cells. This action directly decreases blood glucose levels, tending towards hypoglycemia. Insulin also stimulates the conversion of this excess glucose into glycogen for storage, a process called glycogenesis, primarily in the liver and muscles. And it promotes the conversion of glucose into fat for longer-term storage in adipose tissue. So it's absolutely crucial to understand that glucose homeostasis in the blood is maintained jointly and antagonistically by these two hormones, insulin and glucagon.
A constant balancing act.
Precisely. Glucagon raises blood sugar when it's low, like between meals or during fasting, and insulin lowers blood sugar when it's high, like after eating. This creates a very tightly controlled feedback loop, keeping blood glucose within a narrow, healthy range. Now, when this delicate balance is disrupted, particularly due to insufficient insulin production by the beta cells, or if the body cells become resistant to insulin's effects, which happens in type 2 diabetes, then prolonged hyperglycemia can result. This leads to the complex disorder called diabetes mellitus. This condition is typically characterized by the loss of glucose through urine, because the kidneys get overwhelmed and can't reabsorb all the excess sugar, and sometimes the formation of harmful compounds known as ketone bodies, resulting from increased fat breakdown when glucose can't be used properly.
And treats.
Well, particularly for type 1 diabetes, where insulin production is deficient, patients are successfully treated with insulin therapy, injecting insulin to help manage their blood glucose levels. And just to give that relatable example again, think about what happens after you've enjoyed a sweet Indian dessert, maybe some gulab jamun or jalebi.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately after consuming these sugary treats, your blood glucose levels would naturally rise quite sharply. Insulin is the hormone that then kicks into action, secreted by your beta cells. It ensures that this excess glucose is quickly taken up by your liver, muscles, and fat cells, either used for immediate energy or stored safely as glycogen or fat. This prevents your blood sugar from spiking to dangerously high levels. Conversely, if you were fasting for several hours, your blood glucose would start to drop. This would trigger glucagon release from your alpha cells. Glucagon would then act on your liver to break down stored glycogen and release glucose into the blood, ensuring your brain and other tissues have a continuous supply of energy until your next meal. This constant interplay is absolutely vital for keeping your energy levels stable throughout the day.
That's a perfect illustration, Tutor, of how our body manages something as common as enjoying a sweet treat versus fasting. It really brings insulin and glucagon's roles to life. Okay, now let's explore the endocrine functions of the gonads, the primary reproductive organs. Shall we start with the testes in males?
Certainly. The testes in males serves a dual vital purpose, just like the pancreas and ovary. First, its location. Males possess a pair of testes, which are typically present in the scrotal sac, a pouch located outside the main abdominal cavity. This external location is crucial because it maintains a slightly lower temperature than the core body temperature, which is necessary for efficient sperm production, spermatogenesis, and its dual functions. The testes performs these two key jobs. It acts as the primary male sex organ responsible for producing the male gametes, spermatozoa, sperm, and it also functions as an important endocrine gland producing key hormones, its structure. Internally, the testes is composed of numerous tightly coiled tubes called seminiferous tubules. This is where sperm are actually produced. These tubules are embedded within the surrounding stromal or interstitial tissue. Now, the hormone-producing cells. Located within these interstitial spaces between the seminiferous tubules, you'll find specialized cells called Leydig cells, also sometimes referred to as interstitial cells. These Leydig cells are the primary hormone-producing factories in the testes. They produce a group of steroid hormones, collectively called androgens.
Androgens. Is testosterone the main one?
Yes, precisely. Testosterone is the principal and most potent androgen produced by the Leydig cells.
Okay, so what are the key functions of these androgens, particularly testosterone, in males? They're responsible for male characteristics, right?
Androgens, with testosterone being the main player, have a wide range of profound effects, influencing development, appearance, function, and even behavior. Let's take this step by step. First, accessory sex organs. Androgens regulate the development, ensure the proper maturation, and maintain the functions of the male accessory sex organs. These include structures like the epididymis, where sperm mature, the vas deferens, sperm duct, seminal vesicles, the prostate gland, and the urethra, all essential components of the male reproductive tract. Second, secondary sex characters. Androgens are responsible for stimulating the development and maintenance of male secondary sex characteristics during and after puberty. These include promoting significant muscular growth, the growth of facial hair, beard, and axillary underarm hair, sometimes associated with increased aggressiveness and contributing to the deepening of the voice, leading to that characteristic low pitch in males. Third, spermatogenesis. Testosterone plays a major stimulatory role in the crucial process of spermatogenesis, the continuous formation and maturation of spermatozoa within the seminiferous tubules. It works alongside FSH from the pituitary for this. Fourth, sexual behavior. Androgens act on the central nervous system, particularly certain areas of the brain, and significantly influence male sexual behavior, often referred to as libido or sex drive. Fifth, metabolic effects. These hormones also produce anabolic, synthetic, or tissue-building effects, particularly on protein and carbohydrate metabolism. This promotes muscle mass development and overall tissue growth, contributing to the typically greater muscle mass seen in males compared to females after puberty. All right, now let's move to the female gonad, the ovary, its location. Females possess a pair of ovaries, which are almond-shaped organs located inside the abdomen within the pelvic cavity. Its dual functions. Similar to the testes, the ovary serves dual functions. It is the primary female sex organ responsible for producing the female gamete, the ovum egg. Typically, one ovum is released during each menstrual cycle. And it also functions as a vital endocrine gland, its structure. The ovary is composed of numerous ovarian follicles, which are structures containing the developing eggs present at various stages of development throughout a woman's reproductive life. These follicles are embedded within the surrounding stromal tissues, and the hormones secreted. The ovary produces two main groups of steroid hormones: estrogen, primarily estradiol, and progesterone.
Okay, estrogen and progesterone. So what are the distinct roles of these two main groups of female hormones in female physiology?
Estrogen and progesterone are absolutely essential for female reproductive health, the menstrual cycle, pregnancy, and the development and maintenance of female characteristics. Let's look at each one. First, estrogen, with estradiol being the main form. Its source. Estrogen is primarily synthesized and secreted by the growing ovarian follicles. As a follicle matures during the first half of the menstrual cycle, its estrogen production increases significantly. Its functions. Estrogens produce wide-ranging actions throughout the body. They stimulate the growth, maturation, and activities of the female secondary sex organs, such as the uterus, fallopian tubes, and vagina. They are responsible for building up the uterine lining and endometrium each cycle. They are also crucial for the development of the growing ovarian follicles themselves, a positive feedback loop early on. They trigger the appearance and maintenance of female secondary sex characters during puberty, such as the development of mammary glands, breasts, and the characteristic pattern of fat distribution. They also contribute to the typically higher pitch of the female voice. Estrogens also play a role in regulating female sexual behavior and libido. Second, progesterone, its source. After ovulation occurs around mid-cycle, the ruptured follicle doesn't just disappear, it transforms into a temporary endocrine structure called the corpus luteum, meaning yellow body. This corpus luteum then becomes the primary source of hormone secretion in the second half of the cycle, secreting mainly progesterone along with some estrogen.
Corpus luteum. Okay.
And the functions of progesterone are critical, especially relating to pregnancy. Its most important role is supporting pregnancy. Progesterone is essential for maintaining the uterine lining, the endometrium, after ovulation, making it thick, vascular, and receptive for the potential implantation of a fertilized egg. It's often called the hormone of pregnancy. It also acts on the mammary glands, further stimulating the formation of alveoli, the sac-like structures within the breast that will eventually store milk, and promoting milk secretion capabilities, preparing the breasts for lactation should pregnancy occur. It also suppresses uterine contractions during pregnancy.
Tutor, that clearly defines their individual roles. Now, thinking back to the integrated system, how do these hormones from the testes and ovaries collectively ensure proper reproductive function and the development of those distinct secondary sexual characteristics in males and females? Are there any intricate feedback mechanisms involved in their regulation, maybe involving the pituitary and hypothalamus again?
Absolutely. This is a perfect example of how the entire endocrine system is beautifully integrated through a highly sophisticated feedback mechanism. It involves those three key players we discussed earlier: the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, specifically the anterior pituitary, and the gonads themselves, testes or ovaries. This regulatory pathway is known as the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, often abbreviated as the HPG axis. Understanding this axis is absolutely critical for grasping reproductive physiology. Let's take this step by step again to really appreciate its elegance and control. First, the hypothalamus initiates. The whole process begins up in the hypothalamus, which secretes gonadotrophin-releasing hormone, GnRH. Importantly, it secretes GnRH not continuously, but in a pulsatile manner, little bursts.
Pulses are important.
Yes, the pulsatile nature is crucial for proper pituitary response. Second, the pituitary response. GnRH then travels down that portal system to the anterior pituitary. There, it stimulates the pituitary gonadotroph cells to release the two crucial gonadotrophic hormones, luteinizing hormone, LH, and follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, into the general circulation. Third, the gonads are activated, focusing on males first. In males, LH travels through the blood to the testes and primarily stimulates the Leydig cells to synthesize and secrete androgens, mainly testosterone. FSH, also acting on the testes, works in conjunction with the high local levels of testosterone within the seminiferous tubules to stimulate and maintain spermatogenesis. These androgens, circulating systemically, also drive the development and maintenance of male secondary sexual characteristics. Third, the gonads are activated, now females. In females, the process is cyclic. FSH stimulates the growth and development of several ovarian follicles during the first part of the menstrual cycle. These growing follicles, in turn, produce increasing amounts of estrogen. Estrogen is responsible for the development of female secondary sexual characteristics and also prepares the uterine lining. As the dominant follicle matures, rising estrogen levels trigger a surge in LH release from the pituitary. This LH surge is the direct trigger for ovulation. After ovulation, LH helps maintain the corpus luteum, which then secretes high levels of progesterone and some estrogen, further preparing the uterus for pregnancy and exerting feedback. Now, crucially, for the feedback mechanisms, both androgens, like testosterone in males, and estrogens and progesterone in females, once they reach sufficient levels in the bloodstream, exert a negative feedback effect back on both the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary.
Negative feedback, meaning they turn down their own production.
Exactly. They signal back to these higher control centers to reduce the secretion of GnRH from the hypothalamus and LH and FSH from the pituitary. This self-regulating loop is essential. It ensures that hormone levels don't just keep rising indefinitely, but remain within a tightly controlled physiological range. It prevents overproduction and maintains the balanced, coordinated reproductive cycles and functions necessary for reproduction. This elegant system ensures the proper development of those distinct secondary sexual characteristics and the functional reproductive capabilities specific to each gender. It's a cornerstone of endocrinology.
That's a perfect example of systemic regulation, Tutor. A really elegant control system. Now, it's fascinating to remember that it's not just these major organized glands that produce hormones, right? You mentioned earlier that some other organs, ones we don't traditionally think of as endocrine, also contribute. Let's explore those perhaps more unexpected sources of hormones.
You're absolutely right to bring that up again. It's a common misconception, perhaps reinforced by older textbooks, that hormones are exclusively secreted by those major organized endocrine glands we've just covered. But in fact, as our understanding has grown, we now know that several other tissues and organs in the body, which are not typically classified as traditional endocrine glands, also produce and secrete hormones. These often have very specific, sometimes localized, or sometimes highly specialized systemic effects. Let's start with an interesting one: the heart.
The heart makes hormones.
Yes, indeed. The atrial wall of our heart, the walls of the upper chambers, secretes a very important peptide hormone called atrial natriuretic factor, ANF, sometimes called atrial natriuretic peptide, ANP. Its function. ANF plays a crucial role in regulating blood pressure and blood volume. When blood pressure or blood volume increases, stretching the atrial walls, ANF is secreted. This hormone then acts primarily on the kidneys and blood vessels. It promotes sodium and water excretion by the kidneys and causes dilation of blood vessels. Both actions help to decrease blood volume and blood pressure, bringing them back towards normal levels. It acts as a natural counterregulatory hormone to systems that raise blood pressure, like aldosterone. Next, let's look at the kidney. We know it filters blood, but it's also an endocrine organ.
What does the kidney make?
The juxtaglomerular cells of the kidney specialized cells located near the filtering units produce a crucial peptide hormone called erythropoietin, often shortened to EPO, its function. Erythropoietin's primary role is absolutely vital. It stimulates erythropoiesis, which is the process of red blood cell formation within the bone marrow. This hormone is released, for example, in response to low oxygen levels detected in the blood, a state called hypoxia. By stimulating RBC production, EPO helps ensure the body has an adequate supply of oxygen-carrying red blood cells. And finally, let's consider the gastrointestinal GI tract. The lining of our stomach and intestines is quite active hormonally. Origin. Specialized endocrine cells are actually widely distributed throughout different parts of the GI tract, embedded within the lining of the stomach and the small intestine. These cells secrete several peptide hormones that play critical roles in coordinating the complex processes of digestion and absorption.
So hormones help manage digestion too.
Absolutely, they orchestrate the whole process. There are 4 major peptide hormones produced by the GI tract that you should be familiar with. First is gastrin. This hormone is mainly produced by the stomach lining itself. It acts on the gastric glands within the stomach and stimulates the secretion of hydrochloric acid, HCl, and pepsinogen, both absolutely crucial for initiating protein digestion. Second is secretin. Secretin is released from the upper part of the small intestine, duodenum, in response to acidic chyme arriving from the stomach. It acts primarily on the exocrine pancreas, stimulating it to secrete large amounts of watery fluid rich in bicarbonate ions. This bicarbonate is essential for neutralizing the stomach acid, providing the optimal alkaline pH needed for pancreatic and intestinal enzymes to function properly. Third is cholecystokinin, CCK. CCK is also released from the small intestine, particularly in response to the presence of fats and proteins in the chyme. It has 2 main target organs. It acts on both the pancreas and the gallbladder. It stimulates the secretion of enzyme-rich pancreatic juice from the pancreas, providing the enzymes needed to digest carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Simultaneously, it stimulates the contraction of the gallbladder, causing it to release stored bile juice into the small intestine. Bile is essential for emulsifying fats, breaking them down into smaller droplets for digestion. Fourth is gastric inhibitory peptide, GIP. Also released from the small intestine, GIP, as its name suggests, has an inhibitory function. Its primary role is to inhibit gastric acid secretion and gastric motility, the churning movements of the stomach. By slowing down the stomach's activity, it allows more time for the nutrients, especially fats and carbohydrates, to be properly digested and absorbed in the small intestine. It also stimulates insulin release. And just to make that more concrete, let's use that relatable example again. Think about what happens digestively after you've enjoyed a hearty Indian meal, maybe some rich butter chicken or paneer biryani.
Okay. Making me hungry now.
Well, as this food moves through your digestive system, these GI hormones spring into action to coordinate everything. Gastrin would be released in your stomach, initiating acid production to start breaking down the chicken or paneer protein. As the partially digested food, chyme, moves into your small intestine, its acidity would trigger secretin release, signaling your pancreas to send out bicarbonate to neutralize the acid. The fats and proteins in the meal would trigger CCK release, ensuring that both the necessary pancreatic enzymes and the bile from your gallbladder are delivered to the small intestine right when needed for efficient digestion. And GIP would then gently apply the brakes to your stomach, preventing it from emptying too quickly and allowing your small intestine ample time to absorb all those delicious nutrients. It's a truly exquisitely coordinated dance of chemical signals, all orchestrated locally within the gut. And beyond these specific examples, it's also worth noting, just briefly, that several other non-endocrine tissues throughout the body secrete various signaling molecules called growth factors. These factors, while sometimes acting locally, are absolutely crucial for the normal growth of tissues and play essential roles in their repairing and regeneration processes after injury, ensuring tissue maintenance and recovery.
That's absolutely incredible. Our body truly has chemical messengers working everywhere, coordinating everything from blood pressure to digestion. Now that we've covered where all these diverse hormones come from, let's explore perhaps the most intricate part. How do these hormones actually work when they reach their target cells? What is their mechanism of action at the cellular level? This feels like a really key concept.
This is indeed a fundamental concept, absolutely central to understanding endocrinology, and frequently tested in competitive exams. How do these tiny chemical messengers, often present in minuscule concentrations, elicit such profound and specific changes in target cells? Well, hormones exert their effects on their specific target tissues by binding to highly specialized proteins called hormone receptors. The core principle here is specificity. These receptors are located only in or on the cells of the target tissues. This means a hormone circulating in the blood will only affect those cells that possess the correct complementary receptor for it. Other cells lacking that receptor will simply ignore the hormone. Furthermore, each receptor is typically specific to one particular hormone, or at most, a small group of very similar hormones. It's often compared to a lock and key mechanism. Only the right key, the hormone, can fit into the right lock, the receptor.
Okay, so specificity is key.
Absolutely. Now, when a hormone successfully binds to its specific receptor, it leads to the formation of a hormone receptor complex. This binding event, the formation of this complex, is the critical first step. It's the signal that initiates everything else. This complex formation then triggers a cascade of certain biochemical changes within the target tissue or target cell. Ultimately, these intracellular changes regulate the target cell's metabolism, its gene expression, or its overall physiological functions, leading to the observable effects of the hormone. Now, based on their location within or on the target cell, hormone receptors can be broadly categorized into two main types. There are membrane-bound receptors. As the name implies, these receptors are embedded within the cell membrane, the outer boundary of the target cells. And then there are intracellular receptors. These receptors are located inside the target cell. Most of these are nuclear receptors, meaning they are found within the nucleus where the DNA is located, although some can initially be found in the cytoplasm. You can visualize these two different locations and mechanisms in figure 19.5a and b in your NCERT textbook.
Okay, so the receptor could be on the surface or inside the cell. Does the chemical nature of the hormone itself influence which type of receptor it binds to and where that receptor is located? This sounds like it might be the core principle differentiating the mechanisms.
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. The chemical nature of the hormone is the primary determinant of how it interacts with the cell and, consequently, where its specific receptor will be located. This is an absolutely crucial point for clarity and for exams. Hormones have to interact with the cell in a way that matches their molecular properties, whether they like water or fat, basically. Based on their chemical composition, hormones can be broadly divided into four main groups. 1. Peptide, polypeptide, protein hormones. This is a large group, including hormones like insulin, glucagon, all the pituitary hormones like GH, TSH, LH, FSH, and the hyperthalamic releasing and inhibiting hormones. These are generally water-soluble molecules. 2. Steroids. These hormones are derived from cholesterol, making them lipid-soluble. Examples include cortisol and aldosterone of the adrenal cortex, and the sex hormones like testosterone, estrogen, and progesterone from the gonads. 3. Iodothyronines. This specific group includes the thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. These are derived from the amino acid tyrosine but have iodine atoms attached, making them effectively lipid-soluble as well. 4. Amino acid derivatives. This is a smaller group, derived from single amino acids. A key example is epinephrine, adrenaline, from the adrenal medulla. Some of these can be water-soluble.
That's a really helpful classification based on chemistry. Now let's dive into the two distinct mechanisms of hormone action based on where their receptors are located. Let's start with those hormones that interact with receptors on the cell surface, the ones that don't even need to enter the cell. How do they manage to work their magic from the outside?
Right. Let's detail these two fundamental mechanisms, as understanding them is crucial for grasping hormone signaling pathways. Mechanism 1. Hormones interacting with membrane-bound receptors. This mechanism is typically used by the peptide, polypeptide, protein hormones, and certain amino acid derivatives like catecholamines, adrenaline. Why? Because, as we just classified them, they are generally water-soluble and or too large to easily pass through the fatty lipid bilayer of the cell membrane.
So they get stuck outside.
Essentially, yes. They cannot readily diffuse across the membrane, so their entry into the target cell is generally blocked. Their action, therefore, happens at the surface. They bind to their specific receptors that are embedded within the cell membrane. This binding initiates a cascade of events inside the cell, but importantly, without the hormone itself needing to cross the membrane. The key here is the generation of second messengers. The binding of the hormone, the first messenger, to the membrane receptor triggers the production or release of small intracellular signaling signaling molecules inside the cell. These are called second messengers. Common examples that you absolutely need to know include cyclic AMP, CMP, inositol triphosphate IP3, and calcium ions, Ca++.
JMP, I've heard of that one.
Yes, CMP is a classic second messenger, and the regulation happens via these second messengers. They diffuse within the cytoplasm and in turn regulate various cellular metabolic activities, usually by activating or inactivating specific enzymes or other proteins within the cell, leading to the final physiological response. Okay, let's break that down step by step to visualize the process for membrane-bound receptors. First, the hormone, which we call the first messenger, arrives at the target cell and binds to its specific receptor protein located on the external surface of the cell membrane. Second, this binding event causes a conformational change in the receptor protein. This change often activates an associated enzyme like adenylate cyclase, which is located on the inner side of the cell membrane. This activated enzyme then takes ATP, the cell's energy currency, and converts it into cyclic AMP, CMMP, inside the cell. Third, this newly formed CAMP acts as the crucial second messenger. It diffuses through the cytoplasm and initiates a further cascade, often by activating enzymes called protein kinases. Fourth, this intracellular cascade of reactions, triggered by the second messenger, ultimately leads to the cell's specific physiological response. This could be anything from activating an enzyme, changing the cell's permeability to certain ions, stimulating secretion, or altering metabolism, all achieved without the original hormone ever having to enter the cell itself. It's a signal relay system. All right, now let's look at the other mechanism for the hormones that can get inside. Mechanism 2. Hormones interacting with intracellular receptors. This mechanism is primarily used by the steroid hormones like cortisol, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, and the iodothyronines, thyroid hormones, T3 and T4. And the key property here is that these hormones are lipid-soluble.
Lipid-soluble, so they can pass through the membrane.
Exact. Their entry is easy. Being lipid-soluble, these hormones can readily diffuse directly through the lipid bilayer of the cell membrane and enter the target cell's cytoplasm. Their binding then occurs inside the cell. Once inside, they bind to their specific intracellular receptors. These receptors are often located initially in the cytoplasm or, more commonly, directly within the nucleus itself. This binding forms a stable hormone receptor complex. Now, the crucial step, gene regulation. This hormone receptor complex is the active unit. It typically translocates into the nucleus if it formed in the cytoplasm and then interacts directly with the cell's genome. It does this by binding to specific DNA sequences known as hormone response elements, HREs, which are usually located near the genes that the hormone regulates.
So it directly talks to the DNA.
In essence, yes. Its binding to the HRE primarily regulates gene expression or chromosome function. It acts like a switch, either turning on, activating, or turning off, repressing the transcription of specific genes into messenger RNA, mRNA. The outcome is then determined by this altered gene expression. It leads to the synthesis of new proteins, like specific enzymes or structural proteins, or sometimes the inhibition of existing ones. These cumulative biochemical actions driven by changes in protein synthesis then result in the observed physiological and developmental effects characteristic of that particular steroid or thyroid hormone. Let's try a step-by-step explanation for this intracellular mechanism as well. First, a lipid-soluble hormone, like a steroid or thyroid hormone, arrives at the target cell, diffuses directly across the plasma membrane, and enters the cytoplasm. Second, inside the cell, it seeks out and binds to its specific intracellular receptor protein, which might be waiting in the cytoplasm or already be inside the nucleus. This forms the active hormone receptor complex. Third, this hormone receptor complex then moves into the nucleus, if it wasn't already there, and binds to specific hormone response elements, HREs, located on the DNA molecule near target genes. Fourth, this binding acts as a transcriptional regulator. It influences the rate at which the target gene is transcribed into messenger RNA, mRNA. It usually increases transcription, gene activation, but can sometimes decrease it, gene repression. Fifth, the altered levels of mRNA then travel out to the ribosomes and dictate the synthesis of new proteins or modify the production rate of existing ones. These newly synthesized proteins, for example enzymes, carry out the final functions within the cell, ultimately causing the characteristic physiological response associated with that hormone. Because this process involves changing gene expression and protein synthesis, its effects are generally slower to appear, but often much more long-lasting compared to the rapid effects mediated by membrane-bound receptors and second messengers.
Tutor, that was a truly detailed and clear explanation of the two fundamental mechanisms. Thank you. Just to really summarize that key difference then, Could you clarify one more time why some hormones absolutely need those second messengers without entering the cell, while others can just waltz right in and interact directly with the genes? Is it purely down to their chemical nature, water-loving versus fat-loving, or is there perhaps more to it?
No, you've got it exactly right. The chemical nature of the hormone, its solubility in water versus lipids, is indeed the primary determinant of its mechanism of action. It's an absolutely crucial point to grasp for your understanding, and definitely for exam clarity. Hormones simply have to interact with the cell in a way that is compatible with their own molecular properties and the cell structure, particularly the cell membrane. Let's just break it down one last time for emphasis. Water-soluble hormones, like the proteins, peptides, and catecholamines. These hormones are typically larger molecules, and they are hydrophilic, meaning water-loving. The cell membrane, as you know, is fundamentally a lipid bilayer, a fatty barrier. Water-soluble molecules just cannot easily cross this fatty barrier on their own.
Right. Oil and water don't mix.
Exactly that principle. Therefore, these hormones are effectively forced to interact with receptors located on the outer surface of the cell membrane. Since they cannot physically get inside to deliver their message directly, they have to rely on that relay system within the cell. Their binding to the surface receptor triggers the production or release of those intracellular second messengers like AMP or CAC++I inside the cytoplasm. These second messengers then amplify the signal and carry out the necessary internal cellular changes, like activating enzymes, allowing the cell to respond appropriately without the original hormone ever having to breach the membrane itself. Lipid-soluble hormones, like the steroid hormones and the thyroid hormones. In contrast, these hormones are generally smaller molecules and they are hydrophobic, meaning lipid-loving or fat-soluble. This property is absolutely key. It allows them to readily diffuse directly through the fatty lipid bilayer of the cell membrane, almost like dissolving through it, and easily enter the cell's interior, the cytoplasm.
So they have an access all areas pass.
Exactly. Once inside, they can then travel to bind with their specific intracellular receptors, which, as we discussed, are often found waiting in the cytoplasm, or more commonly, directly inside the nucleus. Because they are physically inside the cell and can form a complex that directly interacts with DNA, they can directly influence gene expression and protein synthesis, often leading to more profound, fundamental, and longer-term physiological changes compared to the quicker, often metabolic adjustments triggered by surface receptors. So yes, this elegant differentiation in mechanism based on chemical solubility ensures precise control and allows for different types of cellular responses, some rapid and transient, others slower and more sustained, all dictated fundamentally by the hormone's molecular structure and its ability or inability to traverse that critical cellular barrier, the plasma membrane. It's a fundamental principle governing how our chemical messengers work. Okay, so to summarize our extensive deep dive today into chemical coordination and integration, let's quickly recap the most vital nuggets of knowledge, the key takeaways for your exams. First, always remember the distinction and partnership. While the neural system provides rapid, point-to-point coordination, the endocrine system offers sustained, widespread chemical coordination using hormones. Crucially, both systems work in unison, integrated not in isolation, to maintain our body's complex functions and homeostasis. Second, that modern definition of hormones is vital. They are non-nutrient intercellular messengers produced in trace amounts, acting on specific target tissues via receptors. This broadens our understanding beyond just the traditional glands. Third, we covered the locations, key hormones, and primary functions of the major organized endocrine glands. The hypothalamus, releasing inhibiting hormones, pituitary, GH, TSH, ACTH, LH, FSH, PRL, MSH, oxytocin, vasopressin ADH, pineal, melatonin, thyroid, T3, T4, TCT, parathyroid, PTH, thymus, thymosins, adrenal glands, medulla, cortisol, aldosterone, androgenic steroids, pancreas, insulin, glucagon, and the gonads, testis, testosterone, ovary, estrogen, progesterone. And critically, remember the associated disorders like gigantism, dwarfism, acromegaly, diabetes insipidus, ADH issue, goiter, cretinism, thyroid issues, Addison's disease, adrenal cortex issue, and diabetes mellitus, insulin glucagon issue. Fourth, don't forget that other organs also contribute to hormonal regulation. We highlighted the heart with ANF for blood pressure, the kidney with erythropoietin for RBC formation, and the gastrointestinal tract with hormones like gastrin, secretin, CCK, and GIP coordinating digestion. This really demonstrates how widespread chemical coordination truly is in our bodies. And finally, we detailed the two main mechanisms of hormone action, based on hormone chemistry and receptor location. Remember, water-soluble hormones, peptides, proteins, catecholamines, utilize membrane-bound receptors, working via second messengers like can't map without entering the cell. Lipid-soluble hormones, steroids, thyroid hormones, on the other hand, readily cross the cell membrane to bind with intracellular receptors, often nuclear, directly regulating gene expression. Understanding all these details, the glands, the hormones, their functions, their regulation via feedback loops like the HPG axis, and their mechanisms of action is absolutely key to grasping how our body maintains its delicate balance in metabolism, growth, development, reproduction, stress response, and overall homeostasis. So my strong advice is to revise this crucial topic again before your exam. Pay special attention to linking each gland with its specific hormones and their diverse functions. Try to actively draw out the connections and feedback loops we discussed, like the hypothalamus pituitary axis controlling the thyroid, adrenals, and gonads, or the antagonistic interplay of insulin and glucagon, or PTH and TCT. Definitely practice diagram-based questions, particularly those asking about the anatomical location of these endocrine glands, figures 19.1, 19.2, 19.3, 19.4, key visuals, and thoroughly review previous NEET and board exam questions related to common endocrine disorders, hypo and hyper conditions, and the different hormonal mechanisms of action. This active recall and application will really solidify your understanding. Remember, clarity on these concepts and a structured approach to learning them are your greatest tools for success in competitive exams. Feel free, of course, to reach out if you still have any doubts about this chapter or require further clarification on any of the complex mechanisms we've explored today. Keep learning, stay focused, and best of luck.